Hey everyone, today we'll be going over hand tools in carpentry, specifically layout tools. So some of the tools that you need for layout are pocket tapes, which we just call tape measures, folding rulers, they're made of wood and sometimes like a fiberglass composite. And the ones that we have in the lab go to 6 feet. Steel tapes, in here we have 100-foot tapes. And make sure that when you hook the end of a tape that you do it right, because some of them have a foot that looks like that, like our 25-foot tape measures, and your blade is over here. And the 100-foot tapes, when you look at it from the top, it looks more like this, similar to like a tab for a soda can. And the reason for that is because you can either hold it here, place a nail in, or that foot folds out, so it's much like that, like this one. So here's our 25-foot tapes that you're probably the most familiar with. Stanley is a pretty good brand. Uh, we have other ones in the lab, but just be aware this is what they look like. These are your folding rulers. On this one, you can see that this has an extension that comes out. It's excellent for taking interior dimensions, such as a door or a window. It allows you to get in there exactly, unlike a tape measure. And here's a 100-foot tape, and this is what I was talking about before with the foot. This piece also can get folded up in. So here is your 25-foot tape measure with the foot hanging over and the blade. And then here is your 100-foot tape measure. Again, here they show that you can drive a nail down in the foot, or you could just leave it lay up against like that. So when you look at a tape measure on the blade, every foot it'll be designated with a black mark. There's red, either the number or a slash, something to indicate that it's at 16 inches, because when we lay out for walls and floors, we're usually doing 16 inches on center, so it's easier. You don't need to search for it. It's right there. Every 19.2 inches, there's a black diamond. The reason for that is because 19.2 inches equals exactly 1/2 of a meter. And again, these are all used for repetitive layouts. So it's easy to go and then just look for the red numbers if you're laying out, rather than trying to figure out what increments of 16 are. Between each inch, you'll see that it's broken down into 1/16 inch segments, and each one has a different name. They're all fractions, so you'll have 1/16, 1/8, 3/16, 1/4, 5/16, 3/8, and then they keep on going up. So here is the black foot at the 1 foot mark, or the black mark at the 1 foot mark. This is indicating that this is 1 foot 1 inch. Not all tapes have that, so keep that in mind. Here's your red background to indicate that it's at 16 inches, which, if you follow this, is 1 foot 4 inches. The black diamond is at 19.2 inches, and again, the reason for that is because it's 1/2 of a meter. Squares. So combination squares are used to lay out 90 and 45-degree angles. Now, these are on the next slide, but just as a quick reference, they look something like this. Now, this side will be your 45, and this side will be your 90. So you can also use these to check the depth of rabbets, grooves, and dados. What that means is if you have a piece of wood and you have a rabbet or a groove or a dado, then you can rest your combination square on here. And because they're adjustable, the piece can go down here and measure the depth of that. Now, that's not the only tool that can get used to measure the depth of a rabbet, groove, or a dado. The folding rulers that they showed on the other page also does the same thing. If you have one that has an extension that comes out, you'll see it's a brass tang. That can come out, and you can also measure the depth of it with that. Speed squares are used to lay out 90 and 45 degree angles. You can lay out more than a 90 and 45 degree angle with a speed square. Those are just the two quick angles when you look at the speed square, right? Because it looks something like that. And then you have your 90 right here, and then this is your 45. If you look at it, speed squares also have a pivot point. They allow you to lay out any angle that you want, and that's more useful later on. You can also use the speed square as a guide for a power saw, which you will be required to do in this class. So when you're laying out your piece of wood, say that this is your speed square here. This will be your 2x4, and you will hold it in this area so you can cut through here, and it'll give you a nice clean sharp cut that's square every time. Here's a combination square. Again, this nut allows this to be adjustable if you need to check the depth of a rabbet, dado, or a groove. This is your speed square, 90 degrees, 45 degrees. And if you look in here, you can also use these for laying out rafters, and you can cut at different angles once you start looking inside this rail. A framing or a rafter square is the big brother of the speed square. So they look more like this, and we'll see more of them on the next page. They do have scales, tables, and inch graduations, and the newer ones also have degrees on them. So you can see, here's your rafter or framing square. This bigger part is called your blade, the smaller one the tongue, and obviously the heel. The sliding T-bevel, this allows you to take precise measurements of angles. There's a nut on the back that gets loosened. You can adjust this, and you're able to slide it in most places, either for the interior or an exterior, and be able to duplicate the angle. So straight edges, we use these to transfer measurements and some other things when a level doesn't quite reach. So straight edges can be made of wood or metal. They should have one edge on it that is straight, and we'll talk about how to do that later. They are useful for many purposes, for layout, for transfer of height, extending what a level can do. Let's say that you have a gap that's 8 feet and you only have a 6-foot level. Instead of trying to guess, you could use your 8-foot straight edge and then effectively lengthen your level. So one way to see whether or not your straight edge is good is draw your line. Then if you flip it over, and draw that, it should be the same measurement. And if it is, the chances of you having a straight edge are pretty good. Another way is using the blocks. So again, this is checking the offset of it. So to check and see if this piece is straight, end, center, end, and if you fasten a line here and a line here, and this is good, then you potentially have a straight edge. So levels are used to check level and plumb. So level is always this direction, and plumb is always 90 degrees from level. Line levels we really don't use in this class. They're not as accurate. So instead of having a torpedo or 2, 4, 6, or 8 foot level, use a string line, and this kind of rides the rails on a string line. And then you'll have your bubble in the middle, hopefully, and then it come out. Plumb bobs are good if you need to transfer measurements, if you have offsets where you just need to plumb down. And here's an example, the torpedo level. So you can see this is fairly level in here. The bubble should be between the two lines in the center. There will be fluctuations depending on the temperature. Sometimes it'll be a small bubble, one like that, or a bigger one like that. Regardless of the side of the bubble, it should be centered up on the two lines. And so you can see in these examples what plumb looks like. So here's your level, and this is at 90 degrees from level. This definitely out of plumb, and that's out of plumb. You can tell by the position of the bubble. And over here, you can tell this is level, the position of the bubble, and this one's out, and that one's out. Here's a plumb bob, so they look kind of like this. The string coming out the back. So in this case, you could see at the top of a wall, there's a 6-inch offset or bump out that they'd like to transfer down to the floor. So to accomplish that, you can tie off up here, have the plumb bob come down, and it'll be 6 inches from where you want it. Well, where you want it, 6 inches from the wall. Chalk line, these are good for making, obviously, lines, but for layout. There are different types of chalk. We use mostly red chalk in the lab. Just be aware that red chalk will stain your clothes, so be careful. When you use it, don't drag it on the floor. Keep it elevated until you're ready to snap. Make sure when you're pulling a line by yourself or when there's two people on it that it's stretched tight before you snap it. If not, you're going to end up with something that looks like a spaghetti noodle. Try not to have sags in the line. Sometimes you can't avoid this because of deviations in the floor. So if there's a sag in your floor, the idea is to avoid it by pulling your line tight. If you don't keep your lines dry, you end up getting your chalk wet, and it's not a fun experience. So always make sure that it's dry. If not, your chalk, like I said, it gets wet or it gets damp, and it makes using a chalk line almost impossible. And here's some examples of chalk lines. We have ones similar to this in the lab. If you're working by yourself, these have a foot on it where you're able to put it on the edge of a piece of material. They also have an area in there where you could hook it to a nail or an awl. And here we have an example of someone snapping a chalk line. This really isn't that far of a distance, and with how high that gentleman is snapping, I'm going to say that the line's not as tight as it could be. Wing dividers, we have these. It's a compass. They look something like this. Right, pencil on this end, and then on this end there's a point. So you can use that to transfer scribe marks if you need to cut something custom. If you need to cut, let's say, around a door jamb that looks something like that. If you have a scriber and you have your piece here, you can set the distance that you need, and then your scriber will ride along this, and your pencil end will reflect that over here. So then when you cut, it'll match. Here's an example of them scribing a piece of wood to go around siding. Again, you set the width of your scriber, come up, and you can see this bumps in there, comes out, you go right down the side of it, in, out, and it'll keep going like that and give you a nice tight fit. Butt markers, we have these for when you guys are ready to do hinges. I have them in my desk drawer. Ask me if you need them. So in conclusion, there's many types of measuring tools. You could use squares to mark different types of angles. You can get straight lines using a string. This is a chalk line or a string line. Level equals horizontal, and this should be plumb, not plump. Equals vertical, and again, plumb is at 90 degrees from level, and level is 90 degrees from plumb. Chalk lines are temporary straight edges. Yeah, that's true. They're especially good for laying out. And that's all. We'll see you guys next time.